Oh, Thought Slime, you really are the gift that keeps on giving, because you are just so goddamn awful. 4 videos, almost in a row. I can't handle this insanity on my own. Hey, Heretic, mind helping me out?
Come on, man, he's beneath you.
True, but I can't just let everything he says go unchallenged.
Yeah, but his smug smarminess is so off-putting, you don't have to. If someone else wants to do this, they're welcome to it. Me, I've got magical lizard things to do. Later.
Gosh damn it, who else?
Oh, hey, it's my favorite Chinese bootleg Timmy Turner Down syndrome looking motherfucker. Been waiting a while to say something about him again.
Ah, why hello there, esoteric entity. I think this'll be good enough. Let's get started.
Antifa. You're all mad at me already. You haven't even watched the video and you're already mad, aren't you? Admit it. On March 5th, 2018, conservative pundit and all-around douchebag Carl Benjamin, known to the internet by his incredibly self-aggrandizing nom de plume, Sargon of Akkad.
Carl Benjamin is not a conservative, you fucking moron!
And here's a newsflash. If I do a political compass test, I still don't come up as a right-winger. I still come up as a centre-left liberal, Kev. But I know you're going to just tell me that I'm an evil right-winger. Maybe that's something to do with your relative position on the political compass, as in, you are so far to the left, literally everyone appears to be to your right.
Was speaking on a panel about the philosophy of objectivism as the guest of the King's Cross Libertarian Society. The event was protested by a group of anti-fascist activists who stormed into the room, unfurled a flag, threw some smoke bombs, and then got their asses kicked pretty bad. Also that day, hundreds of anti-fascist activists protested a speech by white nationalist punching bag Richard Spencer at Michigan State University. 100 or so cops in full riot gear were on hand to fight people who had cardboard signs throwing rocks, and they arrested 24 protesters. Nevertheless, the protest sealed off the venue, and Spencer was forced to give his speech to an audience of about 24 people, while the rest of his fans turned tail and ran away, like little baby cowards.
There was far more than just people holding up signs. Judging by the awful shit that Antifa has previously done, I'm honestly not surprised the riot police showed up. And even then, there were plenty of fights that broke out. No shit people are going to get arrested. I think most unarmed people would turn tail and run if they were faced with a mob of violent adult children. Even if they were armed, I would probably still run, because if I did the supposedly brave thing and stood my ground, drew my weapon, and shot them, I would end up in jail along with the Antifa members who are still alive. It's a bummer, I know. Oh yeah, one more thing. You sure have a lot of nerve calling other people cowards when you yourself consistently refuse to debate your opponents, whether it be ANCAPs like myself, esoteric entity, or filthy heretic, or the fascists you profess so much hatred for. In fact, anyone who expresses any support for Antifa has zero right to accuse anyone of cowardice, because they use violence to silence their opponents instead of debating them.
But Postal Cat, you gotta remember that he was only born with half a brain, which is why it looks like he has Down syndrome. Oh, I wasn't going anywhere with that, I just wanted to take another shot at him.
That's not an argument, esoteric, but oh well.
I'm just taking his same standard and using it against him. It's a good tactic to get leftists to critique their own arguments. Plus, it's not like you didn't make an argument.
Shortly thereafter, Spencer was forced to concede that Antifa is winning.
You know, I really hate to say this, and I definitely hesitate to say this, but Antifa is winning to the extent that they are willing to go further than anyone else.
In that case, Richard Spencer is right about one thing. Antifa is willing to resort to violence to shut their opponents up, whereas I cannot name a single violent thing that Richard Spencer himself has done. I think what he's trying to do right now is invoke rules for Radicals number 11. If you push a negative long enough, it becomes a positive. In other words, if Antifa continues to use violence to shut up alt-righters, they'll invoke the Streisand effect, and alt-right ideas will continue to spread. Richard Spencer can give us puppy eyes and tell us that these far-left thugs are too cowardly to tackle his ideas without the use of physical violence, and thereby become the underdog in the eyes of the public. The fact that you are also willing to lump political moderates with the fascists and use violence against them as well also does a great deal to tarnish your image.
You guys wonder why almost everyone sides with Richard Spencer over you? It's not because people like Richard Spencer, it's because you're the fucking worst. You're a bunch of violent thugs who use force and coercion to shut people down to oppose you, while Spencer, as awful as his ideas are, he does not resort to such tactics.
So, we have two Antifa protests on the same day, one which failed and one which succeeded brilliantly. On the day of, however, only one of them was plastered all over my Twitter feed. The Sargon protest was all anyone wanted to talk about, and everyone was eager to condemn it, both morally and tactically. Oh, what a setback for the anti-fascist movement. Don't they see how bad this makes them look? We need to win people over to our side, and things like this are only going to make people sympathize with the fascists. Besides, Carl isn't even a real fascist. He's just a misguided liberal. Letting him speak won't hurt anyone. Think about the optics. Think about the optics. Why won't anyone think about the optics?
Yes, exactly. When you lump people like Sargon of Akkad with Richard Spencer, of course you're shooting yourself in the foot. Sargon of Akkad is a political moderate, at least compared to Richard Spencer, or hell, even myself. I despise Richard Spencer just as much as I despise Antifa, so I honestly don't care who ends up winning in that case. However, when you try to censor people like Carl Benjamin, believe me, I'm going to root for Carl Benjamin. By the way, that last face is cringy. Don't do it again.
Now, I'm no PR expert. I named my channel Thought Slime and didn't think to check, hey, is slime super popular right now? Is that going to mess up my SEO? But
let's not forget your cringy attempts at self-depreciation. King Cuck. Nah, you're just trying too hard to be edgy. I've made that mistake a couple times myself, and in almost every case, I've earned myself ridicule in the process. It's time you stop before you hurt yourself.
But he's taking shots at himself. You can't criticize him when he's using a deflection tactic. You're not supposed to criticize him anymore because the deflection tactic is supposed to make people stop criticizing him.
it seems to me like if you're really worried about optics, you might want to try to control the story. For example, don't just say, I wholeheartedly condemn the actions of these protesters. Sargon of Egads is not a fascist, and this will only bring attention to him and his cause. Say instead, while I wholeheartedly condemn the methods of these protesters and their choice of target, it's important that we remain committed to stopping fascists from recruiting and organizing wherever they try to do so. The other manages to condemn the specific people involved and their actions, while still keeping the focus on the fact that we have to do something about all the dang Nazis everywhere.
Why would I want to actively stop them from recruiting? Do you support freedom of expression, or do you not? Do you want to invoke the Streisand effect? What you're proposing here is treating the symptom rather than the root problem. You have to ask yourself questions like, why is the alt-right growing in popularity right now? Why is the alt-right having such success in recruiting people? You obviously don't know the answer to these questions, and I'm convinced that you don't even want to know.
You'll notice that these two statements are saying more or less the same thing. One enforces the idea that people who do Antifa stuff are mindless punch lords going around and smashing shit for no reason.
Yeah. They're pretty much a bunch of adult children who smash property for no good reason. Their ideology they cling onto, communism, is itself inherently violent, just as much as fascism. If the majority of anti-fascist actions are non-violent, I want a citation.
And just for the record, I think Carly Rae Benson is a perfectly valid target for anti-fascist demonstration. I'm not saying the dude ought to get punched, but he definitely needs to be protested anywhere he goes to spread his Dumbo views. There's a reason fascists refer to him as a good entry point for normal people. And while he himself may not be a full-blown fash, he's certainly sympathetic to them and helps them recruit.
Which is exactly why the alt-right constantly makes pot shots against Sargon of Akkad. Which is why the alt-right didn't let him live it down when he lost a debate to Richard Spencer.
The worst case scenario for the alt-right success in this endeavour is less intolerable to me and my family than the SJW success. And so from a tactical evaluation, I have to choose this angle. I have to try and explain to the alt-right that they can get what they want and they should take this gambit.
Well,
even if it means the end of liberal democracy.
Unfortunately, it's hard to disagree with Carl Benjamin on this one. As much as I despise fascism, the actual fascists aren't nearly as bad as the communists. Fascism is like getting the flu, whereas communism is getting diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
You don't have to agree. I understand if you don't. I'm not saying you have to agree with every or any Antifa activity, and I'm not saying you shouldn't criticize the left or Antifa in particular. Criticism is good. Criticize everything. Criticize me, for God's sake. Good luck, though. I'm perfect. I'm saying that when you do criticize, you have to do it thoughtfully. Make sure that your criticism doesn't inadvertently enforce right-wing talking points. Don't give ammunition to our enemies or help them make their case. Use your criticism to platform your own views, rather than theirs. And in any discussion of fascists, make sure that the conversation stays focused on the fact that fascists need to be stopped.
So, in other words, differing opinions are okay as long as they differ in the same way? What the absolute fuck is that shit? No, sir, you have it completely ass backwards. You only criticize anything with the assumption that you have something better to offer than what you are criticizing, which you obviously don't.
I don't understand. You can disagree, but only in ways which I agree with. Isn't that just a really Orwellian way of saying that you like censoring people?
There's this sort of lazy fatalism in the way that we on the left look at public perception. Once something has happened, we just kind of give up on how it's seen. The right-wing reaction machine will beat us at controlling the message anyway, so why bother even trying? It's made us obsessed with how things look, how they'll make us look, whether or not our actions are popular, and how to avoid controversy. It's a vicious cycle, and the right is more than happy to exploit this. They revel in controversy, in unpopularity, in playing the heel.
What is absolutely hilarious about this is the fact that the right-wing reaction machine, as you call it, beats the mainstream corporate media to the punch. In other words, the right wing is far better at applying Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals than you are. They already have to deal with both the mainstream corporate media and leftist snowflakes like yourself, accusing them of being fascists, racists, homophobes, sexists, etc. I'm not talking about just the alt-right. I'm also talking about the people you lump them with, like moderate conservatives, liberals, and libertarians.
And since things are controversial merely for being leftist in nature...
No, what makes it controversial is that it's a violent, authoritarian ideology, something that you and fascists both have in common, coincidentally.
They don't measure their words, they speak from the gut. And even though what they're saying is usually dumb trash, people respond to it because it's spoken with confidence and certainty. They stick to the script and refuse to deviate from their talking points, no matter how absurd it looks.
Sargon's Law confirmed again. You just described your entire channel. You speak from the gut and you refuse to deviate from your talking points, no matter how ridiculous they are. Sir, do you have any sense of irony or self-awareness?
How many times have you heard Dinesh D'Souza claim that the Nazis were socialist because their name is short for National Socialist?
There are more similarities than that, but we'll get to that.
Even though it must have been pointed out to him hundreds of times how wrong that is, how the term privatization was coined to describe Nazi policy, how Nazis imprisoned and murdered socialists.
Privatization in name only. When the government or the mob controls the means of production despite you supposedly owning it, that's not privatization. When you are only allowed to keep your property if you are aligned with the ruling party, that's not privatization.
Oh, finally, another section where I'm specifically useful. Anyway, Nazi Germany unionized their entire labor force through a government union which all workers were compelled to join with force. In the second volume and the 7th chapter of Mein Kampf is the NSDAP Manifesto, which lists that all businesses are to be owned by the government, wage labor is to be abolished, rent and interest are to be outlawed, the division of labor is to be eliminated, the food industry is to be entirely nationalized, all companies are to be run under a worker co-op model, inheritance is to be socialized, all crimes against communal property is treated as sabotage and is punishable by death. Now, obviously, some of these things never happened. This isn't because the Nazis lied. In fact, it was merely because many of these things were either meant to play off one another, were intended to be implemented after the Third Reich achieved supremacy of the world, and because so much of the GDP was being spent on the war. However, we do have their economic program as well, which details what the Nazis did when they were in power, and you can find that they followed their party manifesto pretty closely. No, they didn't imprison socialists, they imprisoned political opponents. And you, as an ANCOM, cannot fucking tell me with a straight face that socialists and communists don't have sectarian disagreements all the time over little parts of their ideologies. Also, this is another trick left-wing historical revisionists like to pull. Yes, it's true that the term privatization was created to describe the Nazi policy, but what you guys are conveniently omitting is the source. The source which coined the term privatization to describe the Nazi economy was a book written in 1945 titled Behemoth, written by Franz Leopold Neumann. Aside from the fact that when it was written, the book was panned by critics for being ahistorical trash with little to no base to back up any of its claims, the most egregious example being that when the book was supposedly written, it was written as a prime source. However, the author was living in the United States when the book was written, so it's not possible for it to have been a prime source. Anyway, Franz Leopold Neumann was also a prominent member of the Frankfurt School think tank, which, if you're not familiar with, was a group of Marxists who formed following the First World War, specifically with the intention of doing damage control for the Marxist ideology in response to the failing of the Soviet Union. So, we have endless historical documentation, official laws archived from Nazi Germany, the Nazi ideology, their economic program, and countless speeches and arguments from Nazi officials, which remained consistent throughout their entire regime's reign. What do you have? Not an entire paragraph from a book which was infamously ahistorical and was written on behalf of a group which was formed specifically to do damage control for Marxism and was just describing nationalization under the name privatization. Sorry kids, you lose. Also, little-known fact that Hitler was also an SJW, saying in a speech from Munich on August 15th, 1920, quote, "We do not believe that there could ever exist a state with lasting inner health if it is not built on internal social justice." And yes, he was referring to intersectional Marxism, since he went on to elaborate in later speeches about social barriers in relation to his concept of social justice.
But none of that matters to Dinesh. All that matters to him is repeating a simple lie over and over, while the truth remains comparatively difficult to argue.
Oh shit. Oh wait, you're being dead serious, aren't you?
And I think there's something we can learn from the right on this.
And nothing else? You're not going to download our videos and do response videos to them? If only for the purpose of proving to your audience that you know what the other side thinks and that you know how to refute them? Come on, man, you can do better than this.
Now, to be clear, I don't think we should lie or hide facts that are inconvenient for our narrative.
Then why do you do it all the time?
That's not only morally wrong and unnecessary when you have the truth on your side, but also tactically unwise.
You constantly lie in your previous videos, so why would you condemn yourself with your own words?
Yeah, if you had the truth on your side, you wouldn't have to cherry pick a half paragraph out of ahistorical propaganda to make your arguments, nor would you have to constantly smear everyone who you even slightly disagree with as a fascist.
Firstly, because it opens up easy avenues of attack for our enemies, and also because people really don't like being lied to or people that lie to them. Once they figure out you tried to manipulate them, they aren't likely to listen to the rest of your ideas.
And you just explained in 10 seconds why people are so strongly opposed to the far left.
No shit, I don't like being lied to. Which is exactly why I comb through your videos to point out all the times you lied to your audience. You sure have a lot of nerve accusing right-wingers of lying, buddy boy.
But I do think we should have talking points. Short, simple, easy to understand sound bites that we can fall back on when the conversation is not going our way.
Unfortunately for you, falling back on sound bites only makes it easier for me to refute you. Come on, man! If you're going to compulsively lie to people like a typical leftist, you can at least gish gallop like right-wing watch. I had to make an hour-long video just to debunk his bullshit. Just give up already! The left can't meme.
Things that are difficult to take out of context, difficult to dispute, and the average person will agree with, even if they haven't read your favorite old dead white dude.
First, I don't need to take anything you say out of context. Your ideology is violent, collectivist, and authoritarian. I don't need to take these tweets you have posted out of context. I can judge by these tweets that you don't even qualify as a left-wing anarchist, because you clearly support gun control, which no self-respecting libertarian across the entire political spectrum would ever support. Second, as long as you put forth the effort to do so, nothing is difficult to dispute. But you obviously find difficulty in disputing right-wing ideas, judging by how often you refuse to debate your opponents, or even watch our videos in order to make rebuttals to them. Third, nothing you say makes sense to normal people.
We have some of those already. Good examples include, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism.
Unfortunately for you, that can be disputed, and it makes no sense to normal people. I've already debunked this in previous videos. I refuse to repeat myself.
That's the problem. You have nothing which is difficult to dispute. The example which you've provided is a straw man argument of opportunity cost. No one argues that no one will buy a product created unethically. The argument is that no producer just decides to behave unethically for no reason when there is a way to create the commodity in question without behaving unethically. It would just look bad on their business. If a producer were to behave unethically to create a commodity, they would need to either cut corners on quality so that they could charge less, or would need to pay workers less and worsen working conditions arbitrarily so that they can increase the quality. No one would work for a company which is paying them less or treating them worse than competing producers, and no one would buy dysfunctional products when an infinite amount of better alternatives are readily available, and aren't too much more expensive. Way to shoot yourself in the foot by demonstrating that even a basic example of what you consider to be a solid argument is both fallacious and incredibly easy to refute.
If people can't be trusted with liberty, they can't be trusted with authority.
That doesn't make sense, at least not when coming from you. You obviously trust the government to ban all guns to make us safe.
I mean, that's actually not even that bad of an argument against statism. The problem is, well, yeah, you can't really make that argument with some of the positions you take.
If someone has $1 they didn't earn, someone else worked for $1 they didn't get.
That doesn't make sense. Heck, I'm not even going to dispute it because of how absolutely nonsensical it is. I can't dispute what you say when I don't even know what you're talking about.
He's talking about surplus value, which doesn't exist because value doesn't come from labor. Value is subjective, and profit's not created from the labor put into it. Profit is created by a product's performance on the market and is paid for by the consumers. Even if the labor theory of value was correct, however, profit from surplus value still wouldn't be unethical, since workers voluntarily agree to sell their labor to producers on an agreed-upon exchange.
We need more. We need to be really good at communicating our goals and intentions, because a lot of things we need to do are going to be extremely unpopular outside of leftist circles.
Are you trying to get yourself killed? No. You have it backwards. What you need to do is to continue lying to people about what your intentions are. Because if people knew the truth about what you wanted to do, they would round you up into helicopters and throw you out of them.
So we have three options here. 1, we never do anything and earn the reputation for being all talk, no action.
We would hate you a great deal less if you did that. We would still laugh at you, but at least you'd be a harmless brat throwing a tantrum, instead of, a terrorist who needs to be tied to a post and shot.
2, we do what needs to be done and accept that we're forever unpopular.
Well, so much for direct democracy, I guess.
I guess if you're that unpopular, not even direct democracy can save you? I find it hilarious whenever a leftist claims to support democracy, but then has to face the fact that direct democracy would almost never guarantee them getting exactly what they want.
Or 3, and this is the option I personally would prefer, we stand by our convictions and make the case for why our actions are necessary. We don't shrink away from scrutiny or speak in wishy-washy hypotheticals, but rather in clear, concise, normal people talk. After all, we understand our beliefs. I think it's arrogant to assume that the general public wouldn't understand them if we made the effort to communicate more clearly.
Oh, please, pretty please! Tell everyone the truth about what you want for society! I can't wait to see Antifa get lynched by the American people!
But it is not the most important aspect of anti-fascist organizing by any stretch. The really important part is stopping Nazis from murdering people.
Oh no! Sargon and Richard Spencer are going to murder people unless we call a preemptive strike and punch their lights out! Oh my gosh!
Like, say, if a bunch of Nazis are circling your synagogue and the police refuse to help, you might want to step in.
Did they break anything? Were they trespassing? If so, yes, that's wrong, and it violates the non-aggression principle. But if they're just in the same town protesting, they're not doing anything wrong. If I went to that synagogue to worship, I would be concerned about it, but I would take proper precautions to ensure the safety of myself and those who worship with me. By protect, I mean do sensible things, like organize a security staff, and maybe form a militia to protect the property, if the rabbi approved. Protecting your place of worship is fine, be it arming yourself or volunteers, but there must be a fine line between knowing if it's a protest or a riot. If it's a riot, act as you see fit to protect your religious community. If they're breaking property and being violent, do what you need to do to defend yourself and your community.
Personally, as a Mormon, I can say that I've never really been persecuted for my religion other than a few mean words. However, if the alt-right were to ever harass the Latter-day Saints near their temples and their places of worship, I wouldn't ask for Antifa's help. The enemy of my enemy is not my friend.
Even if people think it's a bad idea. Should Antifa have not shown up on the night of the Unite the Right rally?
They were purposefully baiting Antifa to show up so that they could fight with them. So yes, it probably would have been better had Antifa not shown up.
I'd wager that if you put it to a vote ahead of time, public opinion would have been against it. Good thing they did, though, because they protected a lot of people who were being targeted by fascists.
Oh, kinda like how the Mafia protects whoever pays the protection racket? Kinda like how the Berlin Wall supposedly protected East Germany from fascism?
Whether or not people get to feel safe on the streets should not be left to the whims of public opinion. There was a time, not that long ago, when public opinion was pretty mixed on whether slavery was okay.
Wait a minute, hold on, so You mean to tell me that the democratic process isn't inherently ethical and that there is an ethical standard which supersedes any forceful action taken by the collective? Guys, I think we are so close to getting him to accept individualism and self-ownership. Ironically, I think these videos taking shits all over him are helping him.
It is moral to defend vulnerable people, whether or not the public at large wants you to. Everyone has a right to feel safe in their community, and a right to defend themselves. And if someone is threatening you or hurting you, they have to be stopped. Oh, but KC, aren't you making Nazis feel unsafe in the streets? Well, dog, thanks for the extremely good faith question. Nazis actually waived their right to feel safe when they started threatening people. People in communities have the right to defend themselves. Full stop. And make no mistake, fascists are not just threatening people, they're murdering people. They're recruiting, they're organizing, they're infiltrating law enforcement and political parties with the expressed aim of forcing people out of their homes and murdering them.
Does that mean I get to declare open season on the communists? I'm not being facetious, Thought Slum. I'm being completely serious. You act like I have to choose between Antifa and the Nazis. You know why most people, including those on the center left, are far more quick to condemn Antifa rather than the fascists? It's because leftist violence is far more widespread. In 2015, the two ideologies that racked up the highest body counts were Islam and communism. And the studies that show that right-wing violence is far more prevalent are often heavily biased and exclude important information. What does that tell us? The problem we have with Antifa is not just their tactics. Oh no, not even their image. The problem we have with Antifa is their entire ideology! Left-wing anarchism and communism in an unholy combination. Just like the alt-right, they are collectivist and authoritarian. Just like the alt-right, they demonize entire groups of people and openly express their desire to kill them. Like it or not, people have the right to hold disgusting beliefs if they don't act on them or violate the non-aggression principle. However, once fascists lose that protection, who's to say that you're not going to lose that protection as well? What makes you think that freedom of expression will remain intact for everybody else? Let's face it, your political beliefs are every bit as abhorrent as the alt-right's. The alt-right is collectivist by its very nature, both in economic and racial terms. The left wing is also collectivist, mainly in economic, but also in all other forms if you include the crazier SJWs. Both sides demonize entire groups of people. For the far right, it's different races, different nationalities, and in many instances, different economic classes. Doesn't that sound an awful lot like the left wing, especially the latter? You've openly admitted on Twitter and other places that you want to kill those who are wealthier than you are. You use your own economic illiteracy to justify your bloodlust. Heck, I can tell by the name Antifa that they're trying to de-emphasize their support for communism. Do they call themselves the Anarcho-Communist Revolutionary Front? The Marxist Riot Club? No! They call themselves Antifa, for the purpose of fooling progressives into supporting their cause, even though Antifa will gladly feed them a bullet once they stop being useful idiots. If people are not allowed to hold disgusting opinions as long as they're not causing physical harm to anyone else, what does that say about you and your right to freedom of expression or thought? If fascists don't deserve to feel safe, if they don't deserve the same legal protection from violence that everybody else is, what does that say about you? If we declare open season on fascists, what makes you think the same thing will not happen to you? Because let's face it, if there is ever a civil war between the fascists and the communists, I will not pick a side. I will declare war on both sides and hide in the woods, and anyone from either side who is foolish enough to step on my territory is going to get a lead enema.
And you know what? You mentioned in the video about how we need to do the best thing for the collective population no matter if they like it or not. Well, that is exactly where your ideology stops being libertarian. You don't believe in human rights, because if you did, you'd understand that humans have the right to self-ownership and self-determination and free association. Actually, you know what? There isn't a single tyranny which can't be justified with that mentality. People smoking cigarettes? Nope, because people should think of their own longevity instead of seeking momentary pleasure in what they want to do. Should a homeless person be allowed to live when they contribute nothing to society and there are sick people in need of their organs who the homeless person could serve as a viable organ donor, who they could use his organs more than he could? Sure, slice that fucker open. Drugs? Nope. Alcohol? Nope. Gun ownership for self-defense? Well, you already answered that one earlier now, didn't you? You don't believe in liberty, you don't believe in autonomy, you're nothing more than a moral busybody, you know, the kind of person who snoops around their neighbor's trash and then knocks on the door to recommend that they eat differently, that person who at a social event throws away all the snacks made by someone else that they brought to share because it contained peanuts and you never know who could be allergic, the kind of person who just needs to mind their own goddamn business and leave other people alone. In a free society, vices exist, but the only things which are crimes are things which actually infringe on other people's rights. Something can piss you off, but unless it directly infringes upon your right as a self-owning individual, you have absolutely no grounds to demand anyone to do anything. The reality is that most people are familiar with collectivist anarchism and what your goals are, and what Antifa advocates for. And you want to know why no one takes it seriously? This is precisely why. Everyone can see the inherent contradiction with collectivism and libertarianism, except for a few retards like yourself. In fact, you know what? I'd be willing to bet that even you don't believe you're a libertarian. You simply call yourself one to help smooth your ideology past the smell test. Well, sorry pal, bullshit is bullshit, and no matter what you top it with, it's always going to smell like bullshit.
If open season is ever declared on the fascists, you better watch yourself, Mr. Slime. I can barely tell the difference between you and the fascists you profess so much hatred for.